Yeah, you just casually mentioned your dissertation for your PhD, which is something I had a question about. So I'll go ahead and jump right into this.
No.
Well, so I was doing this deep dive on your website as I do with all of my guests, and kind of looking for things to talk about. And on your CV, you list your PhD dissertation as being about biocentric composition techniques. I don't even know what this means. So
Don't worry, nobody does, because I came up with the term in the process of writing the dissertation. So I don't blame you. But I had to like squeeze it into like a few
yeah.
words, which is why it sounds like that. Although I would prefer something a little bit more understandable. But yeah, basically it just means music that deals with nature and, composition techniques that incorporate the natural world in some way.
So how does this manifest in your work? I mean, is this what we've been talking about, or is this like another level
This
deeper?
is it relates to the series of pieces called Pieces of Place. That is something that I'm working on still. It's kind of an ongoing project. And also, yeah, it's a little bit more specific in my mind than most of the pieces that I've talked about so far. In like the last 5 years, I've done more composing that I consider to be biocentric, where I'm like actively involving sounds or phenomena or other entities from the natural world in my music in some way. So yeah, that's what biocentric music is. I it can be. I'll explain a little bit further. I mean, it's a pretty broad definition. Biocentric music can be like any music that engages actively with nature. That's how I see it, at least, and that includes a lot of different styles of music and a lot of, I think, musical traditions around the world. And that wasn't my dissertation topic. I'm specifically focused on composition techniques that are biocentric, but I think music has a lot of potential to be biocentric.
Are these techniques that we are all maybe already using, or are they like newly, like, are you conceptualizing these techniques? What are they?
Great question.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so the short answer is that yeah, they are techniques that are already being used, and I ended up, because it is so difficult to say this is a biocentric technique and this is not, I ended up just doing case studies. So my dissertation focuses on two composers and then also on my own work in the Pieces of Place compositions. So I talk about Hildegard Westerkamp's soundscape composition. I talk about John Luther Adams' Become trilogy, Become Ocean, Become Desert, and Become River. And I also meant to talk about Tristan Marai's The Partage des Eaux, which is a big orchestral piece, a spectral piece, but I didn't have time to write that chapter. So hopefully that will be in the future. But yeah, biocentric techniques can involve anything from like field recording, making soundscape compositions with field recordings, data sonification, and you can do those things and kind of ignore the source material. But I guess part of my argument is that it's important to honor whatever natural source you're using in your music. It's important to make that a part of the music, and that's what distinguishes biocentric music from other music, is that this kind of honoring of the source material and the connection with whatever aspects of nature are present in the music.
I mean, is this sort of? I hesitate to use the word activism, but I know of so many pieces that kind of are in response to the climate crisis, for example, which I think would be a form of activism. I mean, I'm sure that this could be, the biocentricity. I'm sure that could be applied in many different ways. Like if I just, I really like the way like a stream flows. I'm sure that.
Yeah.
But I mean, is this kind of tangential to like your way of processing like what our natural world is going through, or is that a stretch or inappropriate for me to ask in any way?
Not at all. That's definitely an important aspect of it, and that's why I started this whole project. The Pieces of Place series was because I was wanted to have some kind of musical response to climate change and global warming. And then in the process of doing those compositions, I started to kind of I don't know, I don't want to be a downer, but I started to kind of like lose a little bit of hope in the possibilities for concert music that's played in concert halls to have any like serious impact on environmental issues or political issues outside of the concert hall. I do think it's possible, but I think it's more limited than we would hope in
Yeah.
many situations and in my experience. And so I kind of pivoted to this more open-ended, like exploratory approach with my compositions and with biocentric music and studying kind of other composers' approaches to using nature in their music. Not because I think it's important to consider the activist possibilities of music, but I decided to just focus on like the compositional methods for using the natural world in music. And then like political and activist goals, I think have to be worked in outside of the music, if that makes
Yeah.
sense, in the way that people bring their music into the world and engage with audiences. Yeah.
Yeah, I've complained about this on the podcast before, and I say complain, that makes it maybe seem a little bit more harsh than it actually is, but, there's a lot of people who make great music, and again, I've said this before, there's nothing wrong with doing this, but, a lot of times it just feels like it's just any old piece of music that had like a title and program notes have been applied to, and so, when you said specifically like data sonification, like that seems like a very real way of like bringing these issues to life through music. But I agree with you that, music alone probably isn't gonna do the trick. I mean, you have to talk to people.
Yeah, and then also maybe like science alone isn't going to do the trick either, because data sonification is used by like NASA to when we like heard the I can't remember what astronomical event it was. There was like a star that collapsed, some important thing that was recorded by equipment on Earth, and I wish I remembered the actual phenomenon that happened. It was some major astronomical event that was recorded, and then if you looked at all of these like news articles, they were like, you can hear finally we can hear a star collapsing. I might be wrong, in audio form, and
Yeah.
actually it's just like whoop, because
Yeah.
it's like it's data sonification. It's not there's no way to actually hear that across space like this, but I think music has the potential to meaningfully sonify data. So the question is always, how do you make meaning from just pure data or information?
Thank you so much for tuning in to Micromaker by Loose Leaf Transmissions. We hope you enjoyed this brief glimpse into the inner workings of the creative life. If this resonated with you, be sure to check out the full conversation on Music Maker with Tyler Kline, a podcast exploring craft and process, philosophy and inspiration, and the honest, often messy parts of being an artist, creative uncertainty, purpose and identity, and resilience. You can find Music Maker wherever you get your podcasts or by visiting musicmakerpodcast.com.